The following program is a PodcastOne.com production.
From Hollywood, California, by way of the Broken Skull Ranch, this is the Steve Austin Show.
Give me a hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Now, here's Steve Austin.
My guest today is Paul Roma. I haven't talked to Paul Roma in a long-ass time. Paul, how you doing, first of all? Welcome to the show.
Well, I'm really glad to be on your show, Steve. I feel like a fan now. I've been out of the business so long.
How long have you been out of business? When did you retire? 98?
I would guess about that, yeah.
God dang. And, man, we just wrestled a few times here and there down in WCW. And, all this time has passed by. I'm going to read a quick email. I got a show email for the Steve Austin Show. And I got an email one time, man, and it said, hey, Steve, Paul Roma is my trainer and has told me nothing but good stories about you two from back in the day. Would you ever consider having him on as a guest? And he said, best, Joe Zimbardi. And I said, of course. Paul and I always got along. The respect is mutual. So anyway, that's how we hooked up this conversation. And I told Paul, I got this email and I called Paul. Geez, when was it we talked? Was it November or December?
I think it was December.
I was sitting in a deer stand, and I was talking in a real quiet voice, like I was trying to kayfabe the deer so I didn't scare them all away. I don't know what Paul was thinking. He said, this fucking Austin guy's out of his mind. I was in a deer stand sweating my ass off trying to talk to Paul. I said, we were catching up, just trading those stories, because Paul is kind of like I am with a lot of guys. Man, we never had each other's phone number. You left the business. I went my way. We don't have each other's email address, but it's kind of one of those things where, like I said, the respect is mutual. So once we hook up, it's just like it never, just like it was always the way it was. We just turned into friends. But you're talking to me on the phone, I'm thinking, man, this guy must think I'm real weird the way I'm talking. And we finally, I told her, I said, you got to be on my podcast. I said, we'll just sit there and shoot the breeze and talk about the old days, but give me time to get back so I can do my research. Well, I got back to Los Angeles, and now they're remodeling my house. And then, so I'm renting this house next door. Did you get that picture I texted you, Paul?
No, I don't think I did.
Oh, I told you I was having
wait, just now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a picture of my computer on this little bitty, it's like a $20 ottoman you get off the internet. And Paul's laughing at me because he knows the chicken shit setup I'm talking about is a shoot. And I'm sitting in this fucking chair, and I got to bend down because my microphone is so far, away from my mouth. So I went into the damn garage, and we got this little 2-foot step ladder. So I needed something to rest my microphone on. So I got my microphone on the 2-foot ladder. I got my computer in a little box. I'm sitting in this chair. It's kind of like a lowrider chair. All they need to do is hit that lowrider music, and it'll be my theme song for the show. Is your life a clusterfuck like mine, Paul? Or now that you're about 58 years old, has all the years in the business made you smarter?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes I think I'm smarter, and then there's those other days, man, and then I know that's just a lie I've been telling myself. God damn.
I want to kind of skew this conversation more towards something that can speak to, the students of the wrestling class or the wrestling program that you help coach. And to be able to just talk about navigating the business, learning things along the way, because I know you've done a whole lot of interviews. I listened to some of those, and I got to watching a bunch of your matches. And man, you had speed, strength. I mean, you had a great physique, very athletic. The way you jump on those turnbuckles, just moved like a cat, and you had a great look. You came in back in the time when, what'd you start, 85, 86?
Yeah, maybe around there. Hell, I can't remember.
But, I mean, it was kind of the wild, wild west back then. And back in growing up, I was in Texas, so I was really cutting my teeth on NWA, Mid-South, Power Pro, stuff like that. And then I started getting more in New York right when you guys, along with Jim Powers, become the Young Stallions. And then, followed you from Power and Glory and on, and then you ended up in WCW. And then we crossed paths. Hell, y'all took the World Tag titles from me and Regal. You and Arn did at a television tape, and I think it was at Center Stage, wasn't it?
I don't know if it was there or it was in Florida.
Goddamn, was it Florida? It might have been.
It may have been in Florida. I don't know.
But anyway, let's go back to your high school days, because when I look at the way you worked in the ring, you were aggressive as a heel. You had that mean streak. As a babyface, you had fire on your comebacks. Dude, you were really, really solid in the ring. And I'm thinking, this guy was a hell of an athlete. And I had to go back and watch some of your stuff. Dude, what's your athletic background? Were you a football player, track guy?
I ran hurdles for a little bit.
Dude, you on a damn track running hurdles?
Played a little football.
Dude, but you weren't as big back then.
Well, when I tried out for the pros, I was actually about 185 pounds. I was a wide receiver, split end. Ran a 4.5 40, not bad speed, for a white boy.
Pretty good vertical leap?
Yeah. I could, at the time, I could touch the top of the square in a backboard.
Yeah, that's a pretty good set of goals. Hey, man, when you said you tried out, where was this at?
I tried out for Chicago. Made it about the third round. Basically told me that one coach really loved me. This other guy just didn't want me. No way, shape, or form. So I moved on and got into wrestling.
But where'd you play college at?
University. I went to University of New Haven. It's kind of I'll make a long story short. I knew a trainer for the New York Giants. He knew about my background, knew how he watched me play semi-pro ball. And he said, listen, you got to go to college. Just play a little organized ball. And I get you a tryout tomorrow. I know you're that good. I've seen you stick people. So I was like, okay, great. So I worked full-time, went to school full-time, and I cashed in my insurance policies to pay for school, and I couldn't do it all. So, yeah, didn't happen.
So how long did you last in college?
Hell, maybe a year. I couldn't do it all. It was too much,
When you say you couldn't do it all, working full-time, what about the books? Were you a good student?
Nah, not that great. Wasn't into the books. I was into sticking people, And that's what they put in my write-up, actually. They gave me a hell of a write-up and said, listen, I'd go tell him to hit that 300-pound lineman. He'd go whack him and take him out. And that's what I did. So, it wasn't meant to be. Next thing you know, I was wrestling.
Okay, but I know you come up in the Connecticut area, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where you're still at. And then, so back in, when you're trying to cut your teeth, you got into New Haven, a little bit of college, didn't like the books. It was too much. You're trying to work a full-time job. So were you a fan of the business, or did you just look at the business as, hey, man, this is my next way that I can, make a living?
No, my father had asked me, he said, hey, listen, he called me in the room and said, why don't you do this? And he had wrestling on. He goes, you're big enough. And I said, that crap, I ain't going to do that shit, And he goes, I should think about it. And I said, that's bullshit. And I walked away. And I was a marshal, in the system, in the Connecticut system. And a former pro fighter came up to me and said, hey, listen, I know somebody in the wrestling business. I think you should be a wrestler. And he kind of intrigued me a little bit. So I went to a local show for WWF. And, then I ended up joining a wrestling school. And then after the wrestling school, since they didn't teach you all that much, I really got my notoriety when Mr. Fuji took me under his wing and started training me. And that's really when I got my break.
Okay, but you're training people right now. You also have a regular job. We're going to get to that. But, according to the thing right here, it says Tony Altomare trained you beginning, but then
right.
Fuji was a big influence or mentor towards you. So what did Tony Altomare teach you? Just
to stand there and look good, couple bumps. There was nothing really. Taking bumps. I used my athletic ability to, enhance anything and everything I did. Whether it was like when somebody straddled, running across the ropes and straddle somebody, they go for a backdrop, you straddle them. I started running over them like it was a hurdle. I throw one leg out, one over the side, like, I was running over the hurdle. And, then I started doing flips off, backdrops, landing on my feet and running up the ropes, walking up the ropes, things like that. And so I just enhanced everything. And then I just kept working on my drop kicking ability. Because I knew I could get the height. I just had to make it look pretty.
Sounds like Tony Altomare was a real old school guy.
real old school. And he was creating guys for meat for the WWF, or, the big names to just chop up.
So how did you come upon Mr. Fuji taking you under his wings, and how did you get into the WWF?
Fuji saw me. I used to go to New Haven when they were in town, and they always tell you bring your gear, so I bring my gear. And Fuji said, hey, listen, I need some help moving. And I said, sure, man, I'll help you, just tell me when. So he told me. And I said, how about if I, you got to move your entire house, right? You're going to pack it in a truck. So how about if I get some people to help? And he said, fine. Well, all in all, I showed up, and we moved him out of his house. He never expected me to show up. I guess one of the ribs with the boys was, tell him, yes, you're going to show up, and then you leave him hanging.
Right.
So I showed up, and he thanked me. And he said, hey, listen, next time we're in New Haven, get there early, and I'll work with you. So I got there early, and we worked for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and we kept that steady going. And then he just continued on, and he started, showing me different things, teaching me, telling me about ring psychology, and this is, why you don't do that and why you do this, and, so on and so forth, and don't take any, useless bumps and things like that. Yeah, and then I followed him down. Basically, when he moved to Tennessee, I was down in Tennessee working in one of the rings down there. And anytime I was on the road or he was there, we traveled together. Even if I wasn't booked, we'd travel up to New Hampshire or Maine or wherever we were wrestling, or that he was wrestling. And he'd get me a deal. He'd say, hey, listen, I don't want to wrestle tonight. Put Paul in my place. So I go in and work, and then he'd critique my match, and all the way home. 3-4 hours just talking wrestling, and we just hit it off. I was that stand-up guy, man of my word.
So were you working some independent shots? Because, like you said, always bring your gear with you. That way, if you got your gear and they call you, hey, man, we need you. So you got your gear. So were you working shots around the area or with a smaller federation?
Yeah, well, they were almost like branch-offs of WWE. Or WWF at the time. Tony would get the deals, get the gigs.
Right.
Pittsfield, Mass, and some, even Brantford and all these little places, Watertown and Waterbury and all this. And then we go out there for, $25 or whatever it was, and, wrestle in front of the people and, try to get your feet wet. But again, still not knowing what the hell you were doing, back at that time.
So when you say that Fuji was a mentor, I mean, dude, this wasn't just a once, hey, I'll give you a pointer here or a pointer there. You guys had a relationship and traveled together, and this guy really did work with you. Oh
yeah, we were. We called him Uncle. I mean, he told me I could call him Uncle, and he says, meant something, and yeah, he would just every even if we watched the match, him and I together. He would ask me, what do you think of this, or what do you think of that, and what did he do wrong here, or what could he have done? And, so I just picked his brain just constantly. And I said, what, Fuge? We were in, Illinois or something, and I said, I can't get to the psychology thing. He goes, listen to me, in his language. He says, it's just going to come to you, and then you're going to be like, wow, it's that easy. So I went out in the match, and I was sitting in a reverse chokehold, and I sat up and I said, holy shit, that's it? And the guy says to me, what? I said, that's it. He goes, that's what? And I said, that's it. That's all there is to it. That's it. And he goes, what the hell are you talking about? And we're having this conversation in the ring. And I said, man, let's go home. And we walked in the locker room, and Fuji was sitting there, and he looked at me when I came in. He goes, you got it. And I said, I got it. He goes, I knew it. He said, I saw the look on your face. I said, Fuge, all this time, that's it. That's all it is, And I try to explain that to my students. It's amazing, once you get it, it turns your whole life around on, how you look at things and even life in general.
So then what was it as it pertains to the squared circle that made the light go off and you say, okay, I got it. This is what it is.
I just understood ring psychology. I understood how to get the people off their feet. How to control the crowd, how to get them to boo. I was in the Pontiac Silverdome, and, you get 50,000 people, 90,000 people to cheer you or boo you, and you have them in the palm of your hand, It's just I can't really put a finger on it, but you understand why you do what you do. You don't do like the Lucha Libre where they just do moves that mean absolutely nothing. They're just high spots. Every move, every bump means something.
When I first got into the business, when I was going to Chris Adams' school, and he didn't smarten us up, man. I mean, because I thought something was up when I got into business, and, I bought in, dude. I thought pro wrestling was real when I was a kid at 7 or 8 years old. Here I am right out of North Texas State. I'm in wrestling school, once every Saturday after they do the TV taping at World Class Championship Wrestling, and this dude ain't smartening us up. So I'm thinking, man, how these guys do this shit in the ring? Anyway, a few months later, I'd have my first match, and Frogman LeBlanc on live TV or live to tape, whatever it was, I found out that it was a work and how it worked. But still, I didn't really know how to go about having a match. And so all these years later, and it took me, give or take, I don't know if it was a year. I mean, I understood I could have a match with someone that could lead me through the paces, but I didn't really understand. And I'll never forget, and I have it somewhere in my garage. It's a piece of paper, a legal paper on yellow legal paper. And he wrote the formula for a match for me. And he put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how many numbers there were. But basically it was babyface shine, heel heat, manic comeback, finish. And either baby goes over or the heel goes over. But, there it was right there in front of me, all the little 5 pieces of a match, and it still didn't register with me. But I did the same thing. It was like, maybe a year in the business or whatever. And then I think after you understand what a match is, then you can take it to the different levels of complexity that you're able to take it to. But I was watching, basketball a while back, and I was watching the Super Bowl this past weekend. And sometimes, like to your students that are in your class, sometimes you can think of a match like this, when it's that babyface shine, or if the heel starts over on top. Sometimes it's a thing where, if you're watching a basketball game and there's that momentum swing, and all of a sudden the team will get on like a 12, 15, 16, 20-point run, and you're thinking, what the fuck's going on here? The other guy's going to are they going to start making shots? Well, all of a sudden the momentum turns, and so they start making everything, and the other team starts kind of blowing their lead. And so if you just think of it as an athletic contest, you're simulating not a real fight, but you are. But it's a wrestling match, so you're simulating combat. So you just got to put it in the context of that. But people get caught up sometimes, I think, too much in trying to think of what the high spots should be, but just think of the logics of what you said, connecting to the people and make them come with you, and being able to control and manipulate them by what you do in the ring, and not begging them, but working them to get them where you want them.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And I learned that in Toronto. I was working with Arn and Tully, and he got me in a hold, and Toronto was tough. They wanted you to move all the time, and they started booing. And I said to Tully, I said, come on, let's go. They're booing. And he goes, now relax, kid. And I said, no, they're booing, man. We got to do a spot. They're booing. He goes, just relax. They'll come. And I relaxed, and he goes, okay, now we go, and they erupted. So, I mean, I had good people around me. I had good people teaching me. Since I was connected with Fuji, I had Harley Race, another person that helped me, Les Thornton. I had some really good people around me that, really had a lot of input, which is what I liked. Yeah, so I owe it all to him.
I got to ask you a question about Harley. But before I get to Harley, Mr. Fuji was the king of ribs, from what I understand. You're riding with the guy, so I'm sure he's not ribbing you. You're kind of his protege. He's taking you under his wing. He's the wily veteran, and here you are, this kid, this young man in the business. So he's taking you under his wing. Did he discuss ribs with you?
Yes, and here's the thing: we're on a flight. We're going to Australia, and he says to me, one of the funniest ribs. I think it was funny. They would paint the boys' fingernails when they went to sleep when we were flying overseas, with nail polish.
Yeah.
So he calls me up to first class, and he says to me, here, and he hands me the nail polish. And he goes, go paint Don Morocco's nails.
Oh no!
And I went, Fuji, please, I'll do anything. but not Don. Please, not Don. And he goes, "Oi, boy, son, you want to graduate?" And I said, "Yes, Fuji, yes, Uncle, I want to graduate." He goes, "Then you do Uncle say." Because that's how he spoke. And I was like, okay. So I went over, and Morocco was sleeping, and I was trembling, man. I was trembling, painting this guy's nails. So we're in the back of the plane, and Morocco's standing there next to me, and he's a big beast of a man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm like, "Hey, Don, what's going on?" He goes, some prick painted my nails. And I went, "Yeah, some bitch got me too." He was like, "He did?" I said, "Yeah." So I was just trying to get the heat off me. I was like, "Shit, man." But no, he biggest ribber. I mean, Fuji was the biggest ribber. Actually, Vince went to Fuji one day and said, "Please, I need you to, just calm down, slow down on the ribs."
So what'd he do?
He actually did. He actually slowed down on him a little bit. I mean, they're out of control. I mean, what they did to the Rooster, Terry Taylor.
What'd they do?
Well, he came in, and there was this thing, man, about WWF and nobody from, either NWA or down south should come into our company and vice versa. So Terry Taylor comes in, and he had his Halliburton. He came in a suit. When he went into the ring, they busted open his Halliburton. They cut made the long pants shorts on his suit. I mean, and he came in, put him, he had his ring stuff on, and he put his stuff away and just walked out like that. I mean, because, if you put the guys over, they're going to just continue on. Yeah. It was brutal, man. And then Outback Jack, they got him. I mean, Fuji got him. He made the worst mistake he could ever make. He walked down to Fuji at the bar and said, "Hey, mate." He goes, "I bet I can outdrink you." And Fuji looked at him, and you don't say that to, a veteran like him. So they got him all messed up. They took the crocodile off his back. They jumped on his Halliburton and crushed that thing, and they pissed all over all of his clothes. I actually went in the room because I thought he was dead. I really did. He was just sitting in the chair, hunched over. I just wanted to make sure he was breathing. Then I left him there and walked out.
Were you ever a big ribber yourself? Because I wasn't. And I think you're probably like me. I was a little bit of a loner. I had the guys that I hung around with, but I wasn't into being ribbed. I could appreciate a good rib if I saw one or that was lighthearted. But the serious ribs, I wasn't really a big fan of. But were you ever a ribber? Did anybody rib you? Because you pretty much had a reputation for being a guy that, hey man, you're a man of your word, but you're a guy that doesn't like to be fucked with.
Yeah, no. Again, I was protected. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, Fuji was the godfather of wrestling. And, the first time he introduced me to Andre, I walked in and he goes, "Come here." He goes, "Andre, this is Paul. He's with me. This is my boy." And Andre said, "Oh, okay." He goes, "Hey, you play cards?" And I said, "No." He goes, "Okay, sit down. We'll play for money. I'll teach you." And then Andre and I hit it off. And then Ted Arcidi walks in to the locker room, and he goes, "Get out of here." And Arcidi looks at Andre, and he's like, "What?" He goes, "I said, get out of here." He goes, "Well, I have to change." He goes, "You go find another place to change. Get out of here now." So he left. So, I mean, if, you didn't have a little juice. And I think that's what helped, too, because, nobody wanted to mess with Fuji. I went into Cleveland, and I walk in the locker room, right? I'm all happy. I go to work. And all of a sudden, one of the guys grabbed me and said, "Hey, Fuji wants you. You better get upstairs right now. He's pissed." So I was like, "He's pissed?" Like, "Yeah, man, he's upstairs. You better go." So I go running upstairs. And I'm like, what the hell did I do, right? So I walk up to him, and I said, "Fuji, what's up?" He goes, "What did you do?" And I said, "What do you mean, what did I do? I just got here." He goes, "What did you do? What'd you say about Harley?" And I said, "I didn't say anything about Harley." I said, "I love Harley." He goes, "Well, you better go talk to Harley." So I was like, holy shit, man. So I go back downstairs, and there's Harley. I mean, that was one tough dude right there, Harley.
Yes.
He had grips on him. I mean, damn, man. He could turn the lug nuts off a car, a tire. I mean, he was unbelievable. So he's sitting there, and I said, Harley, you got a minute? He looks up at me like, kind of mean and pissed. So he goes, yeah, come here. So we walk into the men's room, and I said, Fuji just told me that you're pissed at me. I don't know what I did, I said, listen, I would never say anything about you, I said, I have nothing but love for you. And he goes, well, somebody said that you said something about me. And I said, I'll tell you what, Harley, you bring that son of a bitch in here, and I'll punch him right in his fucking face. And he goes, you know what? He gave me a big hug. He goes, that's all I needed to hear. He goes, I'll take care of it. And that was it. Walked out of there, and yeah. So got the boys trying to bury me, but again, because I had a relationship with Fuji and Harley, and and I told him, I had said to Harley too, I said, you do nothing but help me. We get in the ring, you teach me things. I said, I have nothing but love for you, man. I would never say anything against you.
This is the Steve Austin Show.
Hey, it's Adam Carolla from the Adam Carolla Show. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch and bet on games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, college basketball as well. BetOnline has NHL, MMA, and championship boxing, all your betting needs in one place. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. So have some fun. Make these games and these events and these combat sports a little more interesting with BetOnline. BetOnline. The game starts here.
Steve Austin. Unleashed.
Let me ask you a question about Fuji. I understand, I saw him on WWF. I know he's in the Hall of Fame, highly respected. But what gave him such clout in that locker room? What the fuck was it? Because he was just a little guy.
Well, I could tell you a story that I heard. People swear it's true. Fuji told me the story. I have to believe it's true. My understanding was he was a hitman on his island. He was basically a real badass dude. I know that he had neighbors complain about his dog barking every night, and they call the cops and so on. So Fuji invited him over for a little picnic. And he took their dog, and he fed them their own dog. He cooked their own dog and fed it to them.
God damn, I think I might have heard that story from somewhere. Was that a shoot?
Yeah, that's a shoot, man. That is a shoot.
But all the boys loved him. But he was a merciless ribber. I mean, I think it was all. I think it was done in jest. I think it was just. I'm guessing it was just a total prank. There was no malice behind it. But some of the ribs can get pretty wicked. Harley Race. You just told me the conversation you had in the bathroom with him. We used to go over to Harley's house when we was working with WCW, and we'd all go over there, and him and his wife at the time, he would barbecue, and his wife would make all these desserts, and Harley was an excellent cook. And, man, there was 10 or 12 of us over there, and we'd be laying around. This is before the matches. And then it was like no one wanted to leave. We'd already been on the road. We go to Harley's for lunch. No one wants to leave because they don't want to be rude. And so everybody's just laying around. And so finally Harley would come in there, and you know how Harley talked because you knew him well.
Yeah.
All right, because Harley never raised his voice. So he'd walk into the living room. Okay, everybody get out. And that meant it was time to go. We'd go back to our hotel room, catch a shower, and then we'd go to the building. We'd work Kansas City. And then we'd go back to Harley's that night and just drink beer all night and shoot pool. But Harley was one of the toughest guys in the history of the business. And Ric Flair always told me that. And sometimes when he would go to Japan to defend the NWA title, but I don't know if he had heat or that he needed protection or whatever, they would send Harley to watch Flair's back. So I had heard that he was a tough man. What made him so tough? Because Harley was a guy that took me under his wing as well. I was supposed to be the United States heavyweight champion down there in WCW, but they put me and Brian together, and we've become the Hollywood Blondes. I always heard the story. Let me put the nail in the coffin. I heard so many stories, but did you ever see any instances of Harley having to, be a tough guy or handle anybody? Where did the reputation come from?
I don't know. I never saw him put his hands on anybody.
But everybody feared him. I mean, everybody liked him. Everybody respected him. But everybody feared the shit out of him.
Yeah. I had said this, even my students I said, listen, either you're feared or you're respected, but either one is okay, because chances are no one's gonna fuck with you if you have either one of those.
That's an interesting standpoint.
And with Harley, I respected him.
Same here.
And it wasn't a question of, hey, here I am, this young dude, 245. I can kickbox. Yeah, I could box, man. I could take punches. It wasn't about that. It was, the way I was brought up. I respected him. He put those clamps on my traps a few times and, brought the sweat out of me and made me tremble. But, he's such a great guy. He just is. I just think something happened and it carried on. The reputation carried on. Like Fuji, the reputation carried on.
What was the deal with his grip strength when you say he had the clamps?
He would catch me from behind sitting down, and he would stick his fingers in my traps.
Right. Yeah.
And I would just let this sound out like this, like that, because I couldn't talk. Yeah. And I said, Harley, man, come on. He goes, he told me one day, he goes, I get such a kick out of that. That's why every time he saw me, my back to him, he'd come sneaking up on me. And he'd do it. And he just laughed, man. You just saw this big mountain of a man chuckling with his shoulders, just going up and down. He just got the biggest kick out of it.
And Harley had the best stories in the world, and he would start telling a story, and he'd do that low gravel voice. One time we were down there in WCW, and you've been around the business long enough, because you try to take a flat back bump, you try to protect yourself, but inevitably you're going to land cattywampus, you're going to fuck some shit up, your lower back's going to go out your neck or something. Yep. So anyway, my neck was all jacked up. We were on the road somewhere. It might have been in Kansas City. He goes, kid, come here. Because, a lot of the boys, you kind of turn into self-made chiropractors. Some of the guys are pretty good at cracking necks, working on the back and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was the way it was back then. As you know, dude, we didn't have, and you were half generation before me, we didn't have any medical staff. We didn't have doctors, trainers and stuff like that. This was still a Stone Ages, so for the most part. So anyway, Harley knew I had a bad neck, or my neck was jammed up, so he tells me to lay down, and I'm hanging my head off the end of the table, and the table is, one that you would sit on to get taped up like at a football facility.
Yeah.
And he rolled up a towel, and he wrapped it around my neck, and then that was what he's going to use for traction. And he jerked the shit out of the towel like he's going to pull my head off to decompress it. And I swear to God, Paul, when he did that, it felt like lightning bolts shot out of my fingers and my toes. I thought he was going to paralyze me, and I'm thinking, God damn, it scared the fuck out of me. And he goes, okay, now get up. Now my neck is
taller, right?
Dude, now I'm about 6'5".
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking, okay. I said, no, I'm good, Harley. I think my neck feels better. Meanwhile, it hurts like a motherfucker. He goes, oh, come here. He goes, come here. So he puts me in a full Nelson. He picks me up and just jerks the fuck out of me. When the full Nelson, you know what it feels like. He's pushing my neck down. And then again, I felt like lightning bolts shot out of my fingers and my feet. And he turned around. He looks at me and goes, how's that feel, kid? So what are you going to tell Harley Race? First of all, you damn near paralyzed me. But I said, I fucking feel like brand new, Harley. He goes, just let me know if you, he said, let me know if you need me to do that again. I said, hey, you ain't got to worry about that shit.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah. No, he worked on me in the ring one day. I told him, my neck was sore, and he got me in a hold, and he started massaging my neck. And the same thing, just like you got him down pat, how's that, kid? I mean, I'm like, oh, that feels great. Thank you, Oh, man.
Hey,
good stuff.
When you first came into the WWF and you had to work your way up the card, but when you first came in there, what was the case as far as negotiating for money? Because this is before that, maybe this is before you and Jim Powers, you had become a tag team, and then
right.
The Young Stallions name was born. But just as far as pay right off Jump Street, how did they negotiate that? Just say, hey, kid, you come in here, because I saw a match you was working with Terry Funk, competitive match, but you were there to do the favors. So what would they tell you back then in the Wild West days, just as far as pay structure?
Well, they structured it as when you did TV tapings, they gave you $50 because they felt that they were giving you exposure that, paid you way more than you could ever get.
And that's an interesting standpoint for validating a low pay.
Correct.
But and in theory, it is correct. They're giving you television. They are giving you television exposure to go do other things. But you're there to work, and you got a mouth to feed or a couple of mouths.
Right. Exactly. Then it was just when I got my chance. Actually happened. I was at TV in Poughkeepsie, New York, and I walked over to Fuji. After doing a job, and I said, I'm done. And he goes, okay, you going home? And I said, no, Fuji, I'm done. And he goes, I don't understand. I said, I'm done. I said, I had enough of this. I said, I look better than these guys. I could work. I said, my body's better than all of theirs. I was that cocky dude. I didn't give a shit.
Right.
And he goes, oh, wait. And I said, no, I had enough. I said, I'm making these guys look great. They look like shit, and I make them look great because they're beating me. I said, so you know what? I had enough. It's not going to happen. They don't want to do anything with me. I'm good with it, And he goes, wait. He says, let me talk to Caesar, meaning Vince. And he goes, just go home. Just don't think like that. Let me talk to him. So then he talked to Caesar, and they gave me some bookings, and you pick up, $200-300 a night. One week I did 3 shows, so I got like $900, and you figure back in '85 for a week. That's damn
good money.
That's damn good money, exactly. And I said, shit, I could get used to this, and then I just started, getting more and more. At that point, if you're going to get beat, really it doesn't hurt as much because you're at least lining your pockets a little bit.
So did you ever sign a contract that said you would work X number of dates? How did it work back then? Because when they put, you and Jim Powers were together, the Young Stallions, they come up with a name, whether it was on TV, Vince doing commentary, whatever, y'all the Young Stallions. And
right.
They'd push you guys a little bit, then not so much, or whatever the run was. You've talked about it a million times. My question is, did they ever, back in those days, sign the boys to contracts to say, okay, you're here for a year, or
no,
I know there was no guaranteed money.
Yeah, no, there's no guaranteed money. They signed me. They had me sign a contract, that just basically said they could, obviously, they own my likeness, and all that stuff. I had a big push. They sent me to Australia. SD Jones and I were, and if you would believe this, SD Jones and I were probably more popular than Hogan was here. We were just, he said to me one day, he goes, you don't really understand what's going on. And I said, what are you talking about? And he goes, I don't think you understand how big we are, how over we are. And, he took me out. And, I found out right quick how over we were. We were on everything. We were on Toyota commercials and Hilux commercials, and I was on the dating game, and everywhere we hosted, went to nightclubs, and they paid us to spin records, and we had carte blanche in Australia. And he was right. And, then you come back to reality, which is here, and, and you're back to the grind. But Jimmy and I got our break as Young Stallions because Zink and Martel had broken up.
So they needed another good-looking tag team.
Right. So they said, listen, we're going to announce Zink and Martel aren't going to be here, and we're going to announce that you're going to be going after the titles, And as soon as we announced that we're going to hit your music, you hit the ring because we don't want the people all pissed off. So that's what we did. Well, Jimmy thought that the Young Stallions, he came up to me, goes, they want to call us the Young Stallions. And I said, okay. And he goes, well, I'm not Italian. I said, well, we're not the Italian Stallions. We're the Young Stallions. He goes, well, it's a rib. And I said, okay. He goes, well, is this bullshit? It's a rib. And I said, listen, if we get booked and we book steady, I don't give a shit if it's a rib. You know, I got a family to take care of. So we went out as the Young Stallions. They gave us a nice little push. I was making more money before I hooked up with Jimmy, doing singles. And then once we started getting the pay-per-views, then obviously I was making a lot more money. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because you get more for those. There was no dollar amount set. It all fluctuated. So it all depends on the house. And they put me on great houses. I can't complain. So I was making a good buck. So I can't bitch about it. And then Jimmy kept coming to the ring drunk. And one of the guys grabbed me one night and he said, listen, I don't want to work with him anymore. He's drunk and I'm putting my body at risk. And so I started doing double time. So I was, doing everything until the comeback. He made the comeback. And then I finally said, I can't do this anymore. I'm wearing my body out. And I told him, he's got to cut the shit. And, he got kind of like a little mouthy, like, oh, you think you're a big deal? And I'm like, dude, I don't think I'm a big deal, but I'm doing all the work. We have a 20-minute match. I'm in there for 19 minutes. Are you kidding me? I said, so you know what? I'm done. So I grabbed Pat. We were at a TV in like Arizona or something. And I grabbed Pat, and I said, I can't do this anymore with him. I said, he's coming to the ring drunk. I said, I have a wife, kids, a house. I said, he lives in an apartment. If he loses his job, he doesn't care. That's all he has to pay for. I said, but I lose everything. I worked too hard to get here. So Pat begged me because Pat was the one who came up with the Young Stallions. So he got I had a lot of heat with Pat, a lot of heat. And I really didn't know it. I didn't realize Pat was the one who came up with it. So Pat said, please reconsider. And I said, no, Pat. I said, I don't want to do this anymore with him. So he disbanded us. And people came up to me like Demolition and said, oh, I heard that, you don't want to work with Jimmy. And basically it was all my fault. And I was like, well, we'll see. The cream will come to the top. You believe what you want to believe. And that was Bill Eadie that said that to me. So, they gave me a little bit of a push. I started making some money. And then back on the back burner, Ray was on the back burner. So I just came together one day and I went to the office, sat down with Pat, and Power and Glory was formed.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
For weeks now, New Jersey residents have been plagued by unexplained drones flying overhead.
Is there intelligent alien life? And if so, has the government been covering it up?
All right, UFO sightings the military can't explain. Congressional hearings, Pentagon whistleblower. What does it all mean?
What does it all mean? We are here to try and figure it all out with our new Ancient Aliens podcast. There is a doorway in the universe. Beyond it is the promise of truth. It demands we question everything we have ever been taught. The evidence is all around us. The future is right before our eyes. We are not alone. We have never been alone. Listen to the Ancient Aliens podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, let's go back to the Jim Powers thing, because I've heard you talk about the stories about him coming to the ring a little bit intoxicated, drunk, whatever. So when you told Pat about this, why didn't they call Jim aside and say, hey, man, listen, do you have some issues? Or are you drinking before you get here? Or Paul's doing all the work? Or your opponents, the people you're working with, don't feel safe with you? Did they address anything with Jim rather than just fade the heat to you like it was your fault? Because this should have been addressed.
Yeah, it wasn't, though. You know how it was. I mean, you were there for a while. It may have changed when you got there. I don't know. But, I told Pat. I told him right in front of Jimmy. Hell, Jimmy didn't even deny it. I said, the guys don't want to work with them. He's coming to the ring. He stinks of alcohol. And I said, I can't do this anymore, And, Pat just looked at me and said, well, I just, reconsider. Just reconsider. And instead of turning to Jimmy and saying, listen, what the fuck are you doing, man? I put this team together. I want this to work. Nothing. It was all on me.
So whatever happened to that guy? I appreciate the fact that you had the balls to stand up and say, hey, man, first of all, you're doing 3/4 of the work, if not more. Other guys don't feel safe. But then, just because you want to be a stand-up guy and don't want to work with a guy who's intoxicated, you say something. That takes a lot of balls. Whatever happened to Jim Powers, because I know you would go on to form Power and Glory with Ray, and we'll talk about that, but what did they do with Jim? And was he not in the space of, he might have been in pro wrestler mode where, hey, man, it's a 24/7 party, and he got caught up in the grind? Because it doesn't sound like the business was a priority to him. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but you were there. What was his take on things from your perspective?
It was a big game to him. Like he had notoriety. People noticed him. Kind of got caught up in the moment. The head swelled up, and he's bigger than the game. And what was funny was I had gone to a show late, but I called the office. And I said, hey, listen, I'm going to be late to the show. Just want you to know. They said, no problem, Paul. We'll let the agent know. So I go running to the ring. Jimmy already hit the ring, and I come running in after him. And I come in. He's like, well, nice of you to show up. And I'm like, dude, they knew. I called the office. They knew I was going to be late. And then, he started giving me shit in the ring. And I said, you know what? This has got to stop or I'm going to crack this kid. So I said, I'll just let it go. And I let it go. And then he started hanging out with the British Bulldogs. He started coming to shows late, thinking, I said, dude, you're not a British Bulldog. They could get away with this. We're the Young Stallions, man. We can't get away with this stuff. You can't be running, amok with these guys. They get in trouble. They're not getting fired. They're the damn British Bulldogs, And, he just didn't get it. I don't know. He just didn't get it.
How long did he last in the business after that? Because when he left there, I never heard from him again, unless I missed something.
No, they gave me a push as a single, and he was just kind of basically on the back burner, spots here and there. And then when I got with Ray, that was it. Really, it was over after that. I didn't hear or see him for. Probably just at TVs.
When I was watching some of your work, and the Young Stallions, you were really mechanically sound, but I thought you would get even more mechanically sound. And it seemed to me you were really in a comfort zone, in a heel role rather than a babyface role. Am I correct?
Oh, you hit it 100%.
For me, that's the way I like to work too. So why so for you?
I guess because I've always been confident in my ability, confident in everything that I've done, and I try to teach that to my daughter, who's in gymnastics. There's no second place. If you come in second, that means somebody worked harder than you, and that means you got to work hard. So it came easy for me because I was that, I bodybuild. Every show I go in, for the most part, I'd win. I'd walk on stage and just look at the trophies, with one of my buddies and be like, I'll take that one, and that one. Oh, okay. And that's what I would do. So I was always, I should say always used to, but I was very confident. So when, turning heel made it so easy. One of the agents, Blackjack or Jack Lanza,
yes,
I think it was. Yeah. Jack Lanza said to me, when I turned heel, he said to me, he watched my match, he goes, yeah, you shouldn't do that. You should do this and this and this. And I'm like, okay. So then the next night I went out there and I did what he told me to do, and I was very uncomfortable. And then, Kurt Hennig grabbed me, and he goes, what are you doing? And I said, well, Jack told me to do these things. And he goes, listen, don't get mad, okay? I'm going to just tell you what to do. I said, no, please. You tell me, please. He goes, just be yourself. He goes, you know what I mean? He goes, just be an asshole. He goes, be that guy that walks in the locker room that people hate. And I said, done. And the next night I was on the show and he was on the show, and I just let it loose. And I walked out, and Perfect stand there. He goes, how'd it feel? I said, it was fucking great. He goes, yes, it was. That's you. That's what you need to be. Be yourself. Don't listen to these other assholes. He goes, just be yourself.
Man, that's just great advice, because I've told a lot of people that, and that was a big key to my success, I think, early on in my career, as did many, maybe, people try to emulate someone who was an influence on them, and I thought I would try to work like Ric Flair, kind of a cowardly heel. Obviously, he was vicious during his heat, but he was a cowardly heel and, a premier wrestler, one of the best of all time. It didn't really work for me when I got dropped on my head, when I turned into Stone Cold Steve Austin, when I basically just turned up the volume of who and what I was as a competitive person in an athletic endeavor. That's when everything lined up for me. I was a mechanic down when we worked together in WCW, and Stunning Steve didn't really have a bio or it wasn't a character. It was just a name that Dr. Tom Pritchard had given me. But Stone Cold was me turned up to 11 or 12. And speaking about Curt Hennig, when I first walked in those doors, I've told this story before, everybody's heard me tell it, but, Curt knew me from WCW, and he picked me up. He goes, hey, man, come here. I want to introduce you to somebody. He took me into the production truck and introduced me to Kevin Dunn. He goes, this guy can help you out a whole lot. And he was right. Kevin Dunn did help me out a whole lot. But here he goes again, because Curt Hennig was one of the most generous guys I ever knew in the business. He didn't have any reason. And when I came in theory, I'm in competition for a spot that he's got down the road. He was way better than me at the time, or maybe forever was. But here was a guy, he didn't have no business helping you if he didn't want to. But that's the kind of giving guy that he was, and that was some of the best advice. I think, I'm sure you got a lot of good advice, but that was some of the best advice you'd ever given, and it came unsolicited from one of the all-time greats.
Yeah. And to this day, matter of fact, Paul Orndorff, I saw him last year in New York, and went over and we hugged and kissed each other. And I said to him again, I said, I'm going to bring it up to you again. I remember the day you told me, you called me over, you said, hey, kid, listen to me. You look great. You got a great physique. You could wrestle. Vince will never do anything with you. He said, so what you have to do is promote yourself. So whatever Paul Roma does every night in that ring, no matter how tired you are or how hurt you are, you give those people Paul Roma, what they're supposed to see. And he looked at me and he goes, all these years, you still remember that? I said, I'll never forget that. The best advice you ever gave me. And let me tell you, those days when I was hurting and I still got out and I had to give him what, I had Paul Orndorff in the back of my head tell me that, and I was a babyface. I did it. I hurt even more the next night, but I did it.
And tell me about the conversation with Paul Orndorff, because I can tell you exactly how it went down. He was about 10 or 12 inches from your face. He was staring you directly in the eyes. He was talking in a low voice, and he was very intense. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't angry. But when Paul is passionate about something and he's trying to give you a message or wants to give you some valuable information, that's how he does it. Am I correct?
Oh, you hit it spot on. He is intense. I mean, you look like almost to a point where you think he wants to peel the skin off your face, but it's a passion. You could see the difference.
And you feel it. And he's telling you, and what he's saying was right. And I'll never forget, this was before you guys were pretty wonderful in WCW. And I was actually traveling with Paul because he's the one that got me back into deer hunting. When I'd come in from Texas, I'd stopped hunting because I was in the wrestling business now and didn't have anybody that hunted. Me and Paul Orndorff started riding down the road together. We were both working heel. And we'd be driving down the road, and he'd see a deer out in the field, and, man, he'd almost crazy. He'd go crazy when he saw the deer. Look at that deer. Look at that deer. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, it's a fucking deer. He goes, you hunt? I said, no, man, I kind of stopped hunting because I started wrestling. Oh, you got to start hunting again. Oh, well, I don't know where to go. Well, you can come with me. I got a lease down in South Georgia. So anyway, I got on the lease South Georgia, built a 7 mag. Rick Rude came out there and we started hunting together. But anyway, here's the story. Me and Paul were riding down the road, and he had worked a singles match with you that night. And y'all probably went about 12, 15 minutes. And I told you this story a couple of months ago when I was sitting at a deer stand. And during that match, he did something to you. And we got a shower. We're riding down the road, and I looked over at Paul, and he's driving. And I said, man, there's one part of that about that match you had with Paul that I really liked. And he goes, hang on, let me think about it, and I'll tell you what it is. He thought for just about 2 or 3 minutes. He looked at me while I was driving with the steering wheel. And he goes, it was the armbar spot. And I'm thinking, how in the fuck did he know that? In theory, an armbar spot may be one of the most boring because he had an armbar applied on you. He had it hooked deep. You were sitting on your ass. Your feet were in front of you. And he had his legs kind of, in that wide stance. And he had that deep armbar. And he had his chest out. And he was looking up. And I said, how in the fuck did you know that? And he goes, that's power. And that's all he said. He goes, that's power, brother. He goes, I had him right there, and I was showing those people I had power. And I said, Jesus Christ. I said, you're right. That was my favorite part of the match. Is that unbelievable or what? Yeah. I mean, because he was going to flip-flop and fly for you. You were going to make that dynamic, athletic comeback that you would make, but that was my favorite part of the match, and he knew it, and I guess he knew what was going through my head. Yeah.
Well, you're at that level, and that's what a lot of people aren't at. Like, even today, they're not at that level. They think, that you have to set yourself on fire and throw yourself off the top of a steel cage, to get an applause from the people, and that's their high spot. It just doesn't work. It's like Bugs Bunny, right? And Donald Duck, or whatever his name is, Daffy Duck, when he blows himself up on stage and the people finally applaud for him. Right. And he's like, well, encore. I could only do this once. That's what it's like today in wrestling. They can only do it once.
All right, Paul, to give me the go-home cue, let's put a hold on it right here and come back next week and pick it up with power and glory.
This has been a PodcastOne production. Download new episodes of The Steve Austin Show every Tuesday at PodcastOne.com. That's PodcastOne.com.
Pluto TV has all the shows and movies you love streaming for free. That means laughter is free with gut-busting comedies like The Neighborhood, Boomerang, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Bueller. Mystery is free with countless cases to crack from Criminal Minds, Tracker, and Matlock.
I'm a lawyer, like the old TV show.
And thrills are free with heart-pumping hits like The Walking Dead and Pulp Fiction. Correctamundo. Feel the free Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.